Hey, this morning I want to speak to you on the topic of dreaming unleashed. Dreaming unleashed, and we're going to jump right into it in a story found in 2 Kings chapter 4. And so I'm going to pick up in verse 8. A verse will be up on the screen, but you can follow along as we go. So it says, one day Elisha went to the town of Shunem. A wealthy woman lived there, and she urged him to come to her home for a meal. After that, whenever he passed that way, he would stop there for something to eat. Verse 9. She said to her husband, I am sure this man who stops in from time to time is a holy man of God. So let's build a small room for him on the roof and furnish it with a bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp. Then he will have a place to stay whenever he comes by. One day Elisha returned to Shunem, and he went up to this upper room to rest, and he said to his servant Gehazi, tell the woman from Shunem I want to speak to her. Verse 13, when she appeared, Elisha said to Gehazi, tell her, we appreciate the kind concern you have shown us. What can we do for you? Can we put in a good word for you to the king or to the commander of the army? She replied, no, my family takes good care of me. Verse 14. Later, Elisha asked Gehazi, what can we do for her? So again, he's kind of caught up in this, like we should repay her for her kindness or something. What can we do for her? And Gehazi replied, she doesn't have a son, and her husband is an old man. I'm going to talk to you about dreaming unleashed, and before I speak to that part about the dream, I kind of want to recap this story because we're introduced to a woman that we know really some details about, but other than what's provided, very little about. We know she's from a town called Shunem. Okay, it's a small village about 9 miles south of Nazareth in modern-day Israel. So she's from this town of Shunem. We know that she's wealthy, and for the most part, things are good. I mean, she's married, she has money, she has status. We also know that she's both thoughtful and hospitable, right? She takes note of Elisha and the fact that Elisha travels through this region as he would travel from his area, his region where he lived in the north, down to Jerusalem in the south. And so this became kind of a good maybe stopping point for him, a rest area of sorts, to get something to eat, to kind of refill and then make his way back home or down to Jerusalem where he did a lot of ministry. So she recognized that. She picks up on the fact that he's kind of a commuter, a passerby, if you will. And so she thinks to herself, well, why don't we offer this guy a home-cooked meal? This week, I was gone for work, but the way things worked out with our schedule, like I got home Friday and I ate out. I think it ended up being like something outside of breakfast, like literally every meal since Sunday night. Like I'd eaten out like fast food or a restaurant or whatever, like sit down place. And like I got home Friday and I told Chris, I was like, I just want to eat like peanut butter crunch. Like I just want that's about as homemade meal as I get. But like I just wanted something that wasn't like eating out or eating on the go. And so that's what this lady recognized. Like, hey, he's traveling all the time. Like he probably needs somewhere to just kind of stop off and rest off. And so she invites him in for a home cooked meal. And it kind of became a means for them to develop a friendship. And then she took her thoughtfulness and extended it beyond like a typical hospitality of sharing a meal, where she thought, let's create a guest bedroom for him. So we'll furnish it. We'll create a space where he can kind of rest and relax and complete it like with a bed so that he can sleep and take his time to go through. So we know that about her. We also know that she's incredibly humble. When they try to repay her for her kindness, she doesn't really want to accept it. She doesn't see herself as having done something that is worthy of being paid for. She just thought, this is what I would do for someone that I care about. So this is what I did. Even when they try to put in a good word for her, like with a military leader or with the king, I mean, if someone's saying, hey, I can put in a good word with you with the king or with, the leader of this region, think, yeah, I'll take a good word. She's like, no, it's okay. Like my family takes good care of me. Like I've got it. Like I don't need anything. And so she doesn't feel like that she's owed anything. And so politely, she just graciously declines. And on the surface, this woman really, I mean, when you look at it, she had it all together, right? She didn't have any major needs. She had a nice place. She had extra room. She had a way to accommodate people. She had material needs covered for. And she didn't find herself missing in such a way or find herself empty in such a way that, well, if I could just get in contact with this person, maybe they can provide what I need. So on the surface, everything was good. But at the same time, she had no name that we're aware of. And according to the servant Gehazi, she also doesn't have a son, which if you remember from last week's sermon, we talked about how in the ancient world, a woman's legacy was directly connected to their ability to bring forth children in the world, but not just children, a son, someone to pass on that legacy, someone to provide kind of a lineage, an extension of the lineage in the family name. And so she had no name, she had no son, and therefore she had, in essence, no legacy. And when you put those factors to combine, when you put those things together, what you start thinking about is like not just no legacy, but really no identity. Like we don't know her. We don't know her from one person to the next. We don't know, who she is compared to this woman in this town. Maybe there was another wealthy woman. There's no way from this information provided, if you didn't live there, to be able to pinpoint and say, oh yes, this is the woman that did this. So her identity was kind of lost in the shuffle or a miss throughout this whole thing. And in a lot of ways, this woman, the Shunammite woman, had resigned herself to living a life where, though she didn't have these things that really mattered, she was willing to settle on things that were less significant or mattered less. Identity, belonging, legacy, these things that we would say are critical, or we would say that are like ambitious desires for nearly every person. She didn't have those things, but in her mind, she had succumbed to the fact, well, I don't have that, but I do have a room. I do have, like a meal that I can provide for someone. I do have a house where someone can stay. And so she had made these things that were maybe less important to be of her, well, I've got everything I need. When the truth is there was maybe something greater at need, or maybe something greater to be discovered. And I think this is where maybe some of you may find yourself today. Or maybe those who are watching online in a similar way find yourself, well, everything's good. Like my life is good on this, like I don't have any major need. Like I don't have like this kind of major opportunity or room. I've got a good job. I've got stability in my life. I've got like good friends or good relationships. And so the things that are a part of my life as they are good enough. And yet, on the surface, that's how you may feel, but deep down you recognize and realize that maybe there's something more to this life, or maybe there should be something more to more than to what I just have compared to what I've been willing to accept or allow into my life. And it's possible that as we've gone through this series, you've listened to the stories. So what we've tried to do from the beginning, we've said, like, we're going to talk about great expectations that become or end up feeling like failed realities. And we're going to use the power of story and connecting stories from different people in scriptures to kind of bring to light that, one, other people went through this, and two, there's someone else you can relate to regardless of your circumstance or your situation. And so as we've gone through this, maybe you felt like, well, yeah, that's good, but like I don't really find myself connecting with anyone. I don't, and it's not because the messages have been bad, and it's not because you're a bad person. In fact, it's the opposite. It's because you're good. Like things are good. You don't have beef with God. You're not like putting him on blast anywhere. You're not upset about something. You don't have any sort of like major need of like, oh my gosh, like if I could just get this out and like have people pray for this, then everything would be okay. Like that just doesn't exist in this current moment in your life. And so as we've gone through this series, you felt like, yeah, like it's good, but it's not necessarily personal, or it's not necessarily something that has connected with me just yet. And if that's you, what I want to say to you today is to lean in. It's to step in, because this story, this woman has more to offer you than you may have anticipated. And I think you're going to find yourself connecting in a way and hopefully being disrupted in a way where you say, you know what, something's got to change, because the whole point of this is not just to be saying, yeah, that was a good message, but to say, you know what, there's some things in me that I've allowed, or some things that I have settled on, or some things that have become permissible that need to be disrupted, that need to be disturbed, that need to be awakened. And God wants to manifest himself in such a way to break hold of those things, to release you from those things, so that you can actually step forward into the life or the purpose that he actually has for you. And so if you felt any way at all that way throughout whichever week of this series, I want to encourage all of you to lean in, but especially if you felt like, you know what, these have been good, but I don't see myself in any of these stories. And if you haven't, that's okay, because I think you might actually be this person. This may be your story. And so the Shunammite woman, this is where she was at in life. She was good. Things were good. I don't have a need for anything, nothing. Hey, what can we do to help you? Is there something we can repay you? Is there anything we do? No, I'm good. Life's good. Thank you. Appreciate it. Come back next time. I'm good. And so Elisha, kind of recognizing this, realized that no, something's not right. Like her answer didn't suffice. What can we do for you? Nothing. My family takes good care of me. So he goes back, he's persistent, he says, what can we do for her? And then this is what he says following this conversation with his servant. So call her back again, Elisha told Gehazi. When the woman returned, Elisha said to her as she stood in the doorway, next year at this time, you will be holding a son in your arms. Look at her response. No, my lord, Oh man of God, don't deceive me and get my hopes up like that. You ever like pretend to be okay when you know and like everyone else knows that you're actually not okay? Like, you know, it's like you're like on the brink of breakdown. Like someone can just look at you kind of like not even sideways, but just like make eye contact. Oh, cut, like you're just gonna like melt. You know, it's like someone's like, hey, how are you doing? And then you're like go-to response is to scream. Like, how you doing? I'm good. Like, I'm good. Like, you know, you're like, whoa, hold on. Like, are you sure you're good? Yeah, I'm fine. Like, I don't think you're fine. Like, fine wouldn't be the word, the adjective I would use to describe your current situation. Like, we do that, right? Like, we're like, you know, someone like kind of perceives something, ask a question, and then we try to like sweep it under the rug. No, I'm good. That's exactly what she did. He's like, next year at this time, you'll be holding a son in your arms. No, my Lord. Why would you get my hopes up? Don't deceive me. Don't trick me. I mean, that's literally what she did. And with one promise, Elisha identified her one need. With one statement, he spoke into existence the very thing that had become the source of her hurt, the source of her frustration, the source of her discouragement, maybe even the source of her blanketing, being able to just blanket over a situation and say, no, I'm good. Things are okay. I have everything I need. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because she said she was okay, but obviously she wasn't. And so the question is, why? Like, why did this create such a response? Why did it arouse her in such a way where she felt like there was potential for more harm than good? I mean, after all, like what Elisha said was a good thing, right? For most cases. In a lot of ways, this was what she didn't have. She didn't have a son. So in you know, every sense of the way, this really should have been a dream come true. It should have been everything she had hoped for and everything that she had longed for and what she was desiring and what she was waiting on. What Elisha spoke and said this will come to existence within a year should have been the thing she was willing to embrace, or should have been the thing she was willing to receive. And, you know, this is sadly the way I think most of us, maybe more specifically you, respond to situations, right? Like, why is it that you do that? Why is it when there's a promise or a potential of opportunity or something good, you're so quick to downplay it? You're so quick to discredit it, or to discredit yourself, or to kind of use sarcasm to cope like with the possibility of something good happening. Like here's kind of a real practical example, right? Like job situations. You ever apply for a job and it's like, okay, man, like, do you think you'll get it? Well, I don't know. I mean, they maybe, you know, who knows what they're going to do. Like, you have the credentials, you have the personality, you have the ability. But it's like, man, this could be a really good thing. And you're like, oh, well, you know, you never know how it's going to go. Like, and we just minimize it. And we shrink back from it. I mean, that's just one area. But there's a lot of other areas, right? Dating. Okay, well, I really like this girl. I really like this guy. And it's like, well, could we be something? Well, no, probably not, because he's probably interested in someone else. Or he's got more important things. Or he's got, you know, or she's more focused on this, or there's this other guy that she works with, whatever. And we're so quick, like when there's a potential good or when there's an opportunity for something good, we're so quick to kind of reduce it. And even like those are kind of on the surface, but what I'm talking about is like something like more significant now, like when it's like a dream coming true, when it's something you've worked for, when it's something you've pursued, when it's something you've prayed about, when it's something you've desired or held on to for so long, and the opportunity presents itself that maybe there's a glimmer of hope that maybe this could be the time. So quick say, no, don't do that to me. I don't need that. I don't want that in my life. And I think one of the reasons why you do that, and one of the reasons why she did that, is because of this. It's simply the fear of failure. The fear of failure. You know, this Shunammite woman, she was afraid that Elisha's promise would come true. But she was also afraid that it wouldn't come true. Don't get my hopes up. She was afraid that, like, through this process of him saying something, her hopes would kind of hit an all-time high, only to return to an all-time low. And so this fear of failure of like, well, this may not happen. I mean, she had lived her entire life afraid to dream of possibility. Think about that. To be late into her years and the possibility presents itself, the thing that she's been longing, the thing that she's been lacking, the thing that she's been wanting and desiring deep down inside, it's now spoken to her and saying, this is going to happen from not just a random stranger, but the man of God himself, the greatest prophet in that day. And he's saying to her, this is what's going to happen. This is the word of the Lord. And she was afraid to dream, afraid to think of what if. She was more concerned with protecting her stability than she was committed to embracing her opportunity. She was more concerned with protecting her stability than she was committed to embracing her opportunity. She had something before her, but it's what she had behind her that she was more committed to holding on to. And could it be possible that you've done the same thing? Could it be that when God has presented something before you, when God has made an offer, when God has given an opportunity, you've been too afraid to venture down that road because you thought, well, maybe this is only good, like this is a setup. Yeah, I'm just like walking around, all right, like let me check this floor, God, I don't know. Like, it's like we're walking on a sheet of ice. And you say, no, you know what, I'd rather not take that step. I'd rather not believe into it. I'd rather not hope into it. I'd rather not pray into it because I don't want to get my hopes up. And I don't want to miss out on this. And so instead of aiming for something greater by dreaming for more, you've settled on good enough. Instead of hoping for greater opportunity, you've committed to lesser because it's safer, because there's less emotional risk. But here's the thing. If your dreams are supposed to be bigger than the scope of your life, then your life will always be limited by the scope of your dreams. Think about that. If your dreams are supposed to be bigger than the scope of your life, then your life will always be limited by the scope of your dreams. In other words, if you dream small, you live small. Because you're only going to live as big as you're willing to dream. You know, this is where it spoke like really personal to me. A little over a year ago, I was at a church service, and it was a different church that I didn't regularly attend, but I was there, and it was like their kind of multiple year anniversary, and they were celebrating, and it was like, incredible church, great things that God had done through the people there. They had a ton to celebrate. And we were there supporting a friend and hanging out and having a good time. And as soon as I knew, like, it was on this anniversary weekend, and as soon as we were there, the worship started, and like maybe just a few moments into the service, I began to downplay like what was going to happen in New York. I was literally days away from moving to New York. And so I remember sitting there, and as soon as things started and just like looking around, I'm like, man, this is incredible. Immediately I was just, well, hold on, slow yourself down. Like, take it easy. You got to be strategic, like slow and steady. Don't think about it. There are this many years down the road ahead of you. Like, don't I began boxing in a dream that at that point had existed for 13 years. Something that was as deep a part of me as anything else in my life. But in a matter of just a few seconds, I was so quick to just box it in and put parameters around it and not allow myself to think too much or think too big. And then God literally like challenged me within an instant and said, Ricky, so you need a dream unleashed.
That's good.
You're sitting here looking at all this saying, wow, this is incredible that I did it for them. But if I did it for them, what can I do for you? I didn't bring you here so that you can say, oh, that's good for them. I brought you here so that you can say, what could happen with me? What could I do with you? What could I do for you? What could I do through you? What would I do on your behalf if you chose to dream unleashed versus confining the dreams that I placed within you? Versus protecting them or harboring them and keeping them safe from the possibility of what could be, of what's to come. And it struck me, a couple of things in that moment struck me. One, how quick I was to deny myself, not because God said this is what I needed to do, but because I was afraid that maybe it wouldn't come true. And two, secondly, how quick God was to speak into this and say, don't do that to yourself. Don't put on you what I've never placed on you. Don't speak to yourself what I've never spoken to you. Don't box yourself in when I'm unboxing the things around you and I'm tearing down the boundaries and the walls that have been placed around you so that you can expand bigger and further and farther out than you ever thought possible. But it was all because of this. Because of fear of failure. The woman's story goes on, picking up in verse 17. It says this, but sure enough, the woman soon became pregnant. And at that time, the following year, she had a son, just as Elisha had said. But one day, when the child was older, he went out to help his father, who was working with the harvesters. Suddenly he cried out, my head hurts, my head hurts. And so his father said to one of the servants, carry him home to his mother. Verse 20. So the servant took him home, and his mother held him on her lap. But around noontime, he died. And she carried him up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, then shut the door and left him there. So sometime after this dream became reality, the boy was still young enough to be held in her arms, old enough to be out in the field. This promise that God had made to her, that God had extended to her, a belief that he had instilled in her, all of a sudden, passes away in an unjust type of way, in a way that feels like, why would God do that? Why would God give her something she dreamed for, something that she longed for, only to take it away? Why would God do that to her? So she takes her son, she carries him up to that guest room that she had created and lays him in the bed of the prophet. And then it goes on and says that she grabbed one of her own servants and asked her servant to take her to the man of God, take her to Elisha. And so she goes to Elisha. She's met by Gehazi, and she tells, I need to see Elisha. She goes to Elisha, tells Elisha this situation. And here's what she says. Here's how she confronts him. Did I ask you for a son, my Lord? And didn't I say, don't deceive me and get my hopes up? Did I ask you for a son? Didn't I tell you this wasn't what I wanted? That this isn't what I was asking for? I mean, imagine the grief and the anger, the fury that she must have had. To go to Elisha and say, you told me this was going to happen. I didn't want it. You gave it to me and now it's gone. And in this statement, I think we actually find the second fear that she struggled with, and maybe the fear that, because look, this happens to all of us. When we do have those desires, it's the reason why we have this fear of failure. Because we get something, we get a taste of something, and we think, oh, this is going to be really good, and that relationship breaks off. Or that job wasn't all it was cracked up to be. Or that church experience was good for a moment, and it was hot for a minute, but it fizzled out real quick, as quickly as it started. So we've all had this feeling. But here's the second fear addressed in this. It's the fear of success. The fear of success. What if what I don't want actually happens? What if what I do want does happen and it doesn't last? I didn't want this. This isn't what I asked for. Don't get my hopes up, because if it comes to light and then it disappears or it goes away, then how do I respond to that? How do I deal with that? How do I carry that weight? How do I do that? The Shunammite woman, she had experienced the joy of a dream fulfilled, but then was quickly gripped by a dream that was devastated. A dream that was destroyed. And it wasn't just a dream, it was a tangible person. It was her son. She touched the dream. She felt the dream. She carried the dream. In this moment when that dream died, she held the dream in her literal arms. And then she was reminded of the fact that I didn't want this for this reason. I didn't want this to come true, because what if it didn't work out? What if it didn't play out the way it's supposed to? I think sometimes we're just as afraid of God's promises working on our behalf as we are afraid of them not coming to fruition to begin with. Our fear of success can keep us from ever pursuing the dreams that God has given to us, or the dreams that God has placed on us, because we're afraid, well, what if it works? Then what do I do? Then what happens? What if I do get that job and I'm actually not really capable of like fulfilling it, and then I get fired, and or like I'm not a good employee? Or what if like this relationship does start to work and I'm like wholly committed in this marriage or this friendship or this dating relationship, and I've given part of my heart over to this other person and they don't treat it the same way that I would have treated it if I just held on to it myself. And it works out, but then it doesn't. And so that fear of like, well, what if it does work out, and what if I am committed to this thing, and what if it does go out in the way it's supposed to? And I can't predict what happens if it works because I don't even believe it's going to work to begin with. But I want you to stop and think for a moment and ask yourself these questions. Instead of thinking like, well, what if it worked and then it didn't? Or what if like God gave it to me and I didn't know what to do with it? Like what if God just gave you more? What if God just gave you better? What if God wanted to do something greater than what you were capable of seeing? What if God had purpose that was greater than the pain? What if there was something more significant than the sacrifice? What if God actually intended good for your life and not the harm that we so often perceive from God? What if? What if the difference between you dreaming dreams and you living your dreams is simply you believing in your dreams? I'm convinced, 100% convinced, that people do not live or step into their dreams because they're not willing to believe that they could even happen. Like for me, I always consider myself a dreamer. Like I think about the future. I think about the stupidest. I check the mailbox every day because I'm convinced someone's going to send me money. Why? I don't know. But when it happens, I'm going to say, I've been believing for this day for years. I'll dream the most outlandish stuff. I have dreams when I'm talking about dreams when I'm sleeping and dreams when I'm awake. Like I have dreams I'm playing basketball with LeBron James. I have dreams that I'm hanging out with like world leaders. I have dreams that I'm going to go buy a new pair of sneakers like one day, every day for the rest of my life. It's like the outlandish and the stupid to like the possible and plausible and everything in between. And I'm convinced that people don't step into their dreams. Like the difference between the life they live and the life they dream is simply the belief in the middle. And so when opportunity comes, they're paralyzed by the fear of failure, they're paralyzed by the fear of success, and they don't know what to do with it. And this woman, but this woman, back to the story, this woman, something had changed for her. Because her dream did come true. She held the dream. She held her son. She loved her son. She saw him grow up. She watched him. And so it wasn't just good enough for the dream to die off without her giving some sort of fight to try to get the dream back. So she went to Elisha, she confronted him, said, didn't I tell you not to do this? And then she tells Elisha, you need to come back. He's like, all right, well, go home and this is what I'll do. She says, no, you're coming with me. I'm not going back by myself. And so this is what it says upon Elisha's arrival. He arrived and the child was indeed dead, lying there on the prophet's bed. He went in alone and shut the door behind him and prayed to the Lord. Then he lay down on the child's body, placing his mouth on the child's mouth, his eyes on the child's eyes, and his hands on the child's hands. And as he stretched out on him, the child's body began to grow warm again. Elisha got up, walked back and forth across the room once, and then stretched himself out again on the child. This time, the boy sneezed 7 times, like my neighbor downstairs, if you ever watch my Instagram stories, and opened his eyes. That's who lives down beneath us, babe. It's this Shunammite woman's son. Sneezed 7 times and then opened his eyes. And then Elisha summoned Gehazi. He said, call the child's mother. And when she came in, Elisha said, here, take your son. Verse 37. She fell at his feet and bowed before him, overwhelmed with gratitude. Then she took her son her son in her arms and carried him downstairs. You see, the Shunammite woman knew what it was like to both give up on a dream and then take a dream for granted. You ever done that? You've given up on something, but you've also taken it for granted, and then all of a sudden it's gone. And all of a sudden when it's gone, you realize, no, I should have never taken it for granted, and I can't give up. I can't afford to give up on it anymore. And so in response, she recognized what kind of gift God had given to her, and she fell down with gratitude and recognition. Man, my God has done something that both I didn't believe in, Yet when I had it, maybe didn't fully recognize its significance, but now that it's back, to be overcome and overwhelmed with gratitude. In a time when it seemed like all had failed and all had fallen apart, she would not give up on her son. She would not give up on her dream. And she refused to believe that this was the end of the story, the end of the dream, the end of the journey. She believed that there was something more, that there was something good that had to come out of this. And honestly, it's a phenomenal story of hope, of redemption, of grace, of promise. But the challenge lies with what we do with it and where we feel personally. Because maybe for you, you've given up on your promises. You've given up on the dream. You've stopped, not even given up on the dream, you've given up on dreaming altogether. And you've let go of the idea of possibility and the hope of expectation and the belief of something greater and something better. And you to a degree have not just given up on that, but you kind of swept it away and put it someplace where it couldn't be dealt with, so that you could look around and just say to everyone, I'm good. I have everything I need. I'm a good worker, got good friends, have a good life, make enough money. I'm good. And so you kind of swept that side of it away. And maybe there's some on the other side who you had a taste of it, you had a touch of it. It was there. The audition was there. The job opportunity was there. The relationships, the paperwork, everything that you needed for what you thought was your God-given dream was ready to go. And then all of a sudden, boom, in a moment's notice, it died in your arms. And you thought to yourself, why would God do this to me? Why would he give me this if he was only going to take it away? And you felt like from those situations that the only thing your dreams led to was disappointment. So rather than pursue dreams, rather than experience dreams, rather than live into dreams, you've opted, I'll stay somewhere in the middle. Because when I dream, I get way up here and I get really, really high. But when that dream doesn't happen, I get really, really low. And so to avoid the low, I'll never step into the high. And I'll just live somewhere right here. And I'll stay somewhere in this range. And yeah, everything will be good. But the truth is, God has so much more for you than to be a good employee. God has so much more for you than to just have a good career, or to have like good set of relationships, or to have even a good marriage. What God desires and what God intends is so much greater than that, so much more significant than that. And He uses those things to play into the significance, because before the world began, God had purpose for you. And it wasn't just summed up in a job description. He had significance established on your life, and it wasn't tied to whether or not you ever got married. He had calling and destiny spoken over you. From your mother's womb, the scripture says. And it wasn't tied down to, do you have your dream apartment or your dream house? God intended all of this, and I think this woman's story illustrates what could happen. What could happen on your behalf or for your life if you simply let God in? If you did what the woman did and opened up your home, opened up the doors to your heart, to your dreams, to your life, and just let God stay for a little while. Let God in, and you kind of just open the door and say, okay, well, I'll take it slowly, just like this woman did, a little bit over time, a little meal here and there. Then over time, okay, here's a room for you. You can park it right here and stay as long as you need. And if you were to just kind of like swing open that door and say, okay, God, here's this place where I'm most vulnerable, where I feel most shame, where I feel most like incapable. God, if I just let you in here, God, I know that you can do something. I know that you can work something. I know that you can breathe life into this dream. Yeah. And I really believe that this is what God wants to do for your life. I really believe that when you let God in to that space that we've buried, to that space that we've sealed off, to that place where we said, no, nobody needs to go there. When you let God in, He can awaken something and He can bring something to life that you never thought possible for yourself. But something in the story didn't make sense to me. Like there was something that just like puzzled me. And I couldn't figure it out, like, why did she put the boy in the prophet's bed. I mean, like it doesn't connect, right? Like, why would she put him in Elisha's bed? Well, it would make more sense to put him in her own bed. I mean, let's be real. It actually makes the best sense to put him in his own bed. If you were going to put him in a bed, put him in his own bed, not the prophet's bed. And then, like, as I read through this, I'm like, oh God, yeah, you want to let us in. You want to bring, you want us to invite you in to this aspect of our life. But why the bed? Why the prophet's bed? And then it hit me. That's where the dream came to life. Because it wasn't her dream. It was God's dream for her. So she took her son and she placed her son on the bed of the prophet, the one who first dreamed it and the one who could awaken the dream and revive the dream and bring it back to life. And sometimes what you need to do with that dream that you surrendered, that dream that you put away, that dream that you buried, you've placed it in the wrong place. You actually need to put it to bed. You need to bring it to the bed where it actually first was awakened in you so that God could resuscitate it, so that God could bring it back to life, so that God could say, this is the dream I've given to you. It was my dream to begin with, and now I'm awakening it and bringing it back to life and calling it into existence on your behalf and for your benefit. This woman recognized that this wasn't my dream, God, so I'm not going to put my son on my bed. It wasn't his dream, God, so I'm not going to put him in his bed. I'm going to put him in your bed because you're the one that breathes life into these things. You're the one that awakens these things. You're the one that calls them forth. So God, I'm going to put him on that bed. I'm going to turn around. I'm going to lock that door. I'm going to walk out. I'm going to get the man of God. I'm going to bring him back. I'm going to send him back into the room. I'm going to close the door and tell him, you don't come out of here until that dream comes back to life. And this morning, I want to invite you, whatever your dream is, whatever it is that you've kind of swept under the rug, whatever it is that you've let die and wither away, I want to invite you to bring that thing back out, to go into that deep place, to go into that place where you've avoided, that place where you said no one else is allowed here, and bring that thing out and bring it and lay it on the altar, lay it on the bed where God can bring it back to life and say, now it's time to be awakened, because the bed is where dreams come to life. It's where things are envisioned. It's where things are seen. It's where things have the possibility of becoming reality. So I want to invite you this morning as I close in prayer. I just want you to take time to think about your own life, to scan over your history if need be, to consider what dreams you've let fall by the wayside, what dreams you've said, no, that's not for me, where you've settled on where things are good enough. And as we pray, I want to give you space to respond to that. Not to me, but with God. Say, God, I'm going to give you, I'm open the door, I'm going to let you in. And God, I'm going to take this dream and I'm going to place it on the only place where you're capable of bringing it back to life. So I'm not going to ask you to stand, I'm going to ask you to stay seated. And I just want you to reflect. I'll play some music as we pray. But I'll give you a couple minutes to kind of have that conversation with God. So let's go to God in prayer.